Hi, I'm Conrad Marshall, and from the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age, welcome to Good Weekend Talks, a magazine for your ears featuring in-depth conversations with fascinating people from sport and politics, science and culture, business and beyond. Every week you can download new episodes in which top journalists from across our newsrooms talk to compelling people about the definitive stories of the day. In this episode, we speak to Antonia Marran. The former journalist, parenting author, and now lawyer and advocate is tasked with managing the legacy of her late father, Antony Kidman, a pioneer for his work in adolescent and youth mental health. It's a role for which the experiences of Antonia's own life have prepared her well. She comes from a tight-knit family, including her sister, the Hollywood star Nicole Kidman, and she has endured both the public heartbreak of her first marriage falling apart, then the sudden death of her first husband. Not to mention a midlife love affair, the travails and joys of parenting a blended family of 6 children, and then finally, that late career switch to the law, where she found a sense of career fulfilment that had eluded her so far. Marran talks about all of this and more in a Good Weekend feature story this week, Her Father's Daughter, and hosting this conversation is the writer of that profile, chief reporter for the Sydney Morning Herald, Jordan Baker.
Thanks, Conrad, and welcome, Antonia Kidman, to Good Weekend Talks. It's lovely to have you.
Thanks, Jordan. Good to be here.
Now, you just gave me a photograph of yourself and your dad. This would be probably early 70s, I imagine.
I think I'm probably about 7 or 8 there, so 77, 78, and it looks as though it's at the Blue Mountains. I can't remember when it was taken, but what's he got on? A leather jacket, and I've got a parka on. He looks quite funky.
And so, the story we're running a Good Weekend is this piece about your father's work, Antony Kidman, pioneering psychologist in Australia, also pioneered a lot of psychological approaches like cognitive behaviour therapy in Australia, but also adolescent psychology in particular. So that the centre he founded, the Kidman Centre, is 40 years old this year, and you are on the board, kind of really sort of taking up his legacy and continuing it, which is the theme of the story. And this photograph shows you sort of looking to the side, looking very much like you do now. The same nose, same smile, long brown hair, and your dad. We've seen a lot of pictures of your dad, obviously, when he's a bit older. But this one, I haven't actually seen one of him when his hair's sort of fully dark brown and wearing the 70s singlet and the glasses. And it's a really intimate moment between the two of you. And we discussed too, and tell me a little bit more about some of the similarities between you. Like what was the bond between you and your father like?
It was close. He was a very calm person, a very easy person to be around. He wasn't at all demanding. So he was somebody you could really just be yourself with. And yeah, I liked him. We had a good time together. He laughed a lot. I have a strong memory of him having just laughing a lot. He had a really good, very dry sense of humour. He was a soft man, but he was also strong. He was a man in that he provided for our family and was a centerpiece of it, very sort of foundational. So when he died, we were left somewhat rudderless, myself, my sister and my mother. But he was just this interesting sort of concoction. He was a rare man. That's how I sort of describe him, because he also had this just intense social sort of sense of social justice and compassion that just pretty much informed everything, every aspect of his being and his decision making, and it always came through. So yeah, that sort of in sum what he was, and so in that sense he was a lovely father to have had. Yeah.
And he was quite an unusual 70s 80s dad, right? Because when I was speaking to Craig was like one of the first time that Craig met him. Antony went over to Craig when Craig was barbecuing and was like, so, tell me a little bit about how you barbecue. But you've also described him as a feminist.
He was
Tell me a little bit
feminist.
more about that. And where do you think that came from?
I think, he had a very strong relationship with his mother, who pretty much raised her 4 children, I mean, she remained married, but she was very much the person who made sure that there was food on the table and they were educated and cared for. So she was sort of had an Irish Catholic background. He had a very close relationship with her. He was the eldest of 4 children, and he looked after his siblings in that sense. And he married my mother too, who was a feminist for her own reasons. But yes, he was definitely a feminist in the age of the 70s when, you know, a lot of men and a lot of women probably didn't admit to it, but definitely not that many men. And he sort of proudly just inherently was that. He was the father of 2 daughters, and he was not necessarily, he wasn't a blokey man, put it that way. Not that he had a good circle of friends. He went to a boys' school and, you know, remained
played
sort
rugby,
of,
first 15 or something, didn't he?
He was a good sportsman, a good runner and all of that, but he wasn't a big drinker. He wasn't a blokey sort of guy. So he sort of did have that sensitivity, I guess, that feminine side to him. And I guess that's why, you know, sort of he made those decisions. He was a compassionate person. He sort of, you know, he was aware of the underdog in every level of society. And I guess women have been the underdog for many years. And so it was only natural that he'd sort of have that attitude.
And you've talked to, when we were discussing this, about how he was, he didn't seem to be self-conscious. Like he every time I say that, he kind of laugh. He really wasn't, was he?
No, he was not self-conscious, and I am intensely self-conscious. So it was astounding, some of the things that he did. But you know, I mean, I admire people who are not self-conscious, because it must be wonderful just going through life without having those shackles on. But no, he did lots of things. He'd sing at a barbecue. I remember him telling me a story when he went over to see Dr. Ellis in New York, Albert Ellis, who for the cognitive behaviour therapy work. And as a sort of a technique, he would sort of go on the subway and just scream and make a loud noise just to sort of astound people and see their reactions and things like that. And I still always remember those sorts of stories and go, goodness me, I just cannot imagine ever doing that and liking people looking at me.
And being so unselfconscious that you're focusing on their reactions and not on your own kind of reaction to doing something like that. He sang at nursing homes, didn't he? And he was
did
in a musical theatre society.
Later years when he sort of had more time, he would do that with a group. They were mainly women. I think there were some men in there. But yeah, he would do that. He was involved with the amateur musical societies of on that sort of North Shore. I think it was Linfield and not Willoughby, but maybe it was, I think it was the Linfield Musical Society, and they'd always be putting on shows and things like that, and music. And he used to have music lessons and record little CDs and things like that, which he would play and practice. And he sort of was drawn to his passions and the things that he liked to do, and he'd do them.
When I came to visit you to interview you a few weeks ago, one of the things that really took my fancy was your pianola, because I have not seen a pianola for ages. Tell me about, and then I was speaking to some of your friends, like I spoke to Annette, who grew up next to you, and I spoke to Peter Overton, and they remember these pianola nights, like Christmas Eve at the Kidmans, with everyone gathering around the pianola.
So much fun, and Dad would be playing it, the pedaling it, and just lathered in sweat, because
it's not easy, is it?
Not easy, and singing and everyone, crowded around. It was quite amazing, because he loved music, but he didn't learn an instrument, so he could not read music. My mother played the piano. She was educated in sort of more of a sophisticated way in that sense, but he loved it. And so he thought, okay, well, how can I do this? And so he got the pianola. And then I can't remember ever not having a pianola. So it was just his thing. And then he became obsessed with buying all the show tune rolls and all the songs and stuff that could be played. And we've still got them all. I don't think that there's a place that still produces them in Australia anymore, unfortunately. But but we've still got a huge library of them. So
I poked around them a bit when I was at your house.
Yeah, well, there's more at Mum and Dad's too. There's still.
And some of them like the sort of, YMCA, like it goes into full like 70s and 80s hits.
Because he actually did he liked 70s music too. He liked Janis Ian, he liked Carole King, he liked, he actually did. He liked Bruce Springsteen and a lot of music too. So more modern music, I mean.
So when you were growing up, your dad's work, like when you were a child, your dad's work was sort of more biochemistry,
yes, it was.
Biomedical kind of stuff?
Neuroscience. Yeah, so he used to research, from my memory, he'd research a disease called muscular dystrophy, and that was based at UTS. And then he moved into, and he used to do that for many years, and then my mother got breast cancer in 85, and so I can't quite remember the pivot, but I do believe that it was connected to that. He might have been interested in a few years earlier, but then he ended up pretty much segueing into psychology, and at that stage it was sort of focused on stress and the impact, say, of stress on breast cancer. He worked with her oncologist, and then sort of eventually moved into sort of stress, anxiety and depression, and particularly in the young adult age group. Yeah.
And so you weren't a young adult when he was working in adolescent, like he moved into that later in life.
Yeah.
And you would have been in mid-teens maybe by the time he actually moved into psychology. So
he never was. Yeah, he wrote his first book, I guess it would have been. So Mum got breast cancer in 85, and that's when he moved. I do remember he wrote a book called Tactics for Change, which is sort of like a self-help book that it was about organisation and writing lists and people, just a general sort of change book, I guess, to assist people dealing with managing their lives and, all the sort of overwhelming thoughts and things that come into place and simplifying it. And that book ended up doing very, very well. He self-published it, and he did that because they needed to make up for the income because Mum was working 3 days a week before she got breast cancer. And as soon as she got breast cancer, she was like, I'm done. I'm like, I'm just focusing on trying to get, not have it recur, because hers had moved at that point. It was a stage 2, and she was just we were all very thrown by it. And so it sort of rendered her almost. She just sort of thought, okay, I'm now looking at reducing the stress of my life because I want to live.
And did his move into psychology kind of were you ever the recipient of that wisdom, I suppose? Did you ever take advantage of it?
I did. I have all the time. Yeah, a lot. Many, many times. But I still have a lot of his books on my shelf, and I can't probably tell you, I probably haven't picked one up for a couple of years, but they went with me to Singapore, and there are a couple of ones that I like. There's one called Managing Love and Hate. That's a good one.
Oh, okay.
And they're just little tidbits, and there's also quite a few on anxiety.
Yeah.
And so that works as well, and just, sort of breaking things down. And I mean, the sort of the skills that are sort of propagated don't really change in terms of what they tell you to do from 15 years ago to now. It's basic kind of stuff. It's just you've just got to be reminded on how to apply it. I have been totally, and he was a wonderful person to chat to about sort of issues because he would give you a bit of an objective. Mum was wonderful and has a lot of wisdom and was a great sort of compass and a directional force in that sense. But Dad was quite objective and, could just sometimes come back and not be so, I guess, invested in my outcome.
Yeah, right. So he was would prompt you into what you were
thinking.
Or
just sometimes even listening and going, and just reassuring, which is nice.
But Peter Overton actually tells a story about that he was at university and he says that he was having a bit of a crisis of, direction. And his father, who was like a pediatric anaesthetist professor or something, was like, okay, this is the one that Tony's going to have to deal with. And he tells the story of going over and talking to your father. And your father was very kind of just supportive and sort of saying, well, this is normal. It's okay to feel like this, which sometimes is what you really need to hear, isn't it?
Do. And I know, I remember a lot of times, because he also had a lot of, his journey wasn't an easy journey. It wasn't like he was somebody who, my mother topped the class, and I'm not saying her journey was easy, but I think I mentioned this before. She was just naturally very smart. She was in the OT classes. She went to Sydney Girls High. She just sort of eased through things, beautiful writer. And Dad was, as accomplished, but the road for him he just had to work a lot harder, and some people do, and that's okay. But it was very nice. It's nice to see someone, doing what they're doing and really liking what they're doing. And that person, you don't have to have achieved and done all these amazing things to be able to get there. You can sort of get there in a squiggly way. And that was really, it's very nice to hear that from people, or from him. It's reassuring to go, it's okay. You'll get there in the end. It's just a different road.
And so what kind of grandfather was he? I mean,
beautiful. He was so lovely. He loved being a grandfather. He was there at their births, all of them except for Nicholas, who was born in Singapore, but he would have been. And people were always like, God, you had your father at your birth? And it sounds odd, but it actually wasn't.
And your mum's a midwife, wasn't she?
She was, yeah. And she so they kind of like, but Dad he was very calm with them, really able to just, available too, but really enjoyed them. And he had a very close relationship with Sabella, who's number 4, and she was born, pretty much 3 days after I split up with her dad. So my dad was really, really close with her, and that was very hard on her actually when he died so suddenly. Because he died very suddenly, then her father died very suddenly 6 months later. So she sort of got quite a slam in that respect.
You have 6 children.
Yeah.
Which is quite a lot of children by today's standards. But you said you always wanted a big tribe of
I did.
kids.
I wanted at least 4. So, yeah, and because I got remarried, I got to have 2 more, which was good.
And you said that was sort of almost inspired by living next door to the Overtons with their 4 kids.
I did. I liked the noise and the not so much the case, because our house is ordered, because I like order, not ridiculous order, but reasonable. And I'm not saying their house was not chaotic. I'm not saying the house was chaotic. It wasn't, but I like the noise and just the vibrancy of lots of people around, and I just do. And so I always have. So I was always going to have more than 2. I just don't like quiet. I hate quiet. Even now, I like to have some. I actually don't mind living in an urban environment because I like the street noise and sound and
and the buzz.
The buzz, yeah. But and you can get that in the bush too, because there's so much noise in the bush.
There's a lot of birds singing very early at the moment. But a lot of people might dream of having a big family, but when they actually have the baby, it's not quite what they dreamed of, and they might not want to go and have so many. But you liked having babies, didn't you?
Yeah, I loved it. And the first baby I had, I remember just after the birth, the next, I don't know, she was born at 4:00 or something in the afternoon. So, and then, oh my gosh, just going, wow, and just looking at her, it was so transformative for me, that first child. It was wonderful. And and I just that love and the devotion, and suddenly also having her look at me, and I suddenly was like, oh my God, I grew up then. Not that I was a baby, but I was like, I have to be the best person I can be, because this little girl depends on me. She thinks that I'm everything. And it just, it just changed me in that sense. Yeah, and I loved it, and I couldn't wait to have more.
And have you loved that experience with all the children? Like, does it change over time?
No, I've loved it with all of them. And the only thing that makes me a bit sad is knowing that it does does end. I've loved it with all of them. And I like watching them interact with each other too. I like their bond. They've all lived together with us. So, they're very strong and they're very tight. And it's the saddest thing for me would be if that fractured. I just couldn't bear it.
Is there something that you can do as a parent to try and, because you and your sister are very, very close.
Yeah, we are.
Is there something that, as a parent you can do to help your children become particularly close? I'm not saying that my children are constantly fighting at the moment and it's driving me mad, but I'm keen for any advice on this.
I mean, we fought when we lived together, Nick and I, as kids, and we stopped fighting when she moved out and then I moved out, kind of thing. I just think that as soon, and I've noticed that with our kids. I don't know.
Is it kind of inevitable that they're going to fight?
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
okay,
I notice it.
Okay.
Yeah, because the people are fighting at my house now, like a lot. But it's because it's rivalry. It's a jungle.
Yeah. It's a jungle. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah, and they're just all jostling for position and da-da-da-da. And once they're out of the home, they don't have to do that. But they still do jostle, I think. Like, you've got to be, Mum actually said to me, I was always like, well, she just said everything's kind of got to be equal with all of them. I'm like, well, really? And she said, yes, it has to be equal. And I think I believe her now.
Yeah, right. Because otherwise what they'll remember.
Yeah, and they actually tell each other stuff too. Which I was surprised about.
It's like a Parliament House.
Yeah. They'll be like, well, I got this. And then someone will say, well, you gave that to that person. I'm like, oh, God, okay.
I remember reading something like in one of those books about the fair fairy and the fairy's trying to be fair and then the kids are complaining and the fairy ends up exploding from her attempts to be fair, and I really related to that fairy. Are there periods that you really like? Because, obviously some of your children are adults now. I think youngest is 12, is that correct?
Yeah.
Like, are there parenting periods that you like more than other periods? Like, I remember saying when we were talking the other day that you couldn't really do another toddler after that.
No. I think I found sort of from 18 months to 3 tricky, because there's walking and movement but very little reasoning. Like, they're cute, but when you're parenting them and looking after them and they're just a lot. It's tiring. They're strong and you're trying to get them in the car seat and the this and the that. If you're in a hurry, you have sort of just, so I find that a bit trying. But I must say, as I got older, I got better with that because I just resigned myself to it. Like, I'm not going to try and control it too much. And I also had Craig with the older two, and he's a different sort of person, strong, didn't really worry about toddler tantrums and things like that, was happy to just take them on, whereas I used to sort of try to wrestle with them, and I just found it exhausting, actually, physically and mentally. But cute, but just, oh my God, I love that afternoon sleep. No one's taking that away from me ever. When you're parenting a toddler, it's like, I'm not going anywhere at 2:00.
Yeah, right. People think you're too rigid and you're like, sorry, no.
Yeah, and people are in bed at 7.
And are there any other periods that you sort of struggled with?
I just think that teenage kind of age, actually now where we are, where it's like we've got that 14-year-old age, because they see they're not 16.
Yeah.
So they can't really, there's not parties, and they don't have a huge amount. They've got some independence. They can't work either, but they want to be doing a lot of things like that. So they're rendered a little bit. They're just between a rock and a hard place, and they're separating from you. So they're kind of, they don't really, you say something's white, they say it's black just because. So I find that a little harder. But see, we've got 2 boys at home now, so I don't probably feel it as much as Craig. I think there's a gender thing that's different.
Right.
I felt it more with the girls.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, because they're just, oh, Mum. Whereas the boys are like, I'm not really, sort of on they're in their zone anyway. My relationship with them is a bit different. Whereas I think Craig feels that a bit at the moment. And that's the thing I know is that, look, she's 26, she's about to be 27, someone's about to turn 20, Hamish is 25 and James is 22 and Siv's just gone to ANU. So it's like they go. So you've got to actually have stuff for yourself because they are going to go.
And is that one lesson you sort of learned over the 6, like that maybe you just, that sort of sense of acceptance?
Yes.
When they reach that age that...
And it's really sad and there's grief and all of that, but it's just, I look at me now. My parents aren't around, but 3 years ago or something, I still wasn't, you're living your life. It's inevitable that that's going to happen. We all live our lives. It just changes. I'm looking forward to grandchildren.
Yes.
But that's why I like to have my job.
And so let's move on to that actually, because I could talk about parenting all day. You've written parenting books.
Yeah.
You've done some shows on Foxtel, From Here to Maternity. The Good Weekend editor was saying, I think I shared this with you, that your book about fussy eating was like her Bible when her daughter was refusing to eat anything. The space you've moved into now, both at the Kidman Foundation and in family law, is kind of tied in a way to that expertise that you've built up as a mother, which is in family law. Obviously, there's all sorts of things that go on in family law, but you're particularly interested in sort of high conflict matters and parenting matters. Talk me through a little bit more about what you do both as a lawyer but also as a parenting coordinator.
Yeah. Well, family law is that sort of, I was drawn to it because it's an area of law where there's a strong human connection. So I just like being involved with people at that really terrible, difficult stage in their lives, where, the two centerpieces, I guess, of your life, which is your finances and your children, are sort of in dispute, so to speak. And so connecting with people at that point is very, very satisfying because you can allow them or assist them to sort of come up with some sort of a solution to their problems but within the legal context, not necessarily in a moral context or a what's fair context from a personal point of view, but in a legal context, and therefore advising them or informing them on that, and then allowing them to make their decisions based on that. And it's because it's very different, what you can obtain or what's reality in a legal sense is very different to what a person thinks they're entitled to or expects or perhaps thinks they're not entitled to, is often as frequently the case. So I love that process. And it's as you said, it's big. There's so many elements to it. And I work in a big firm, which, we have a lot of very, very wide and varied matters that span the spectrum. So there's that aspect. And then there's parenting coordination is not where you're advocating for one party, so to speak. It's more where you're sitting in the middle. It's a newish kind of approach that's come out of the US. They use it a lot in South Africa too. And it's whereby people who have orders or a parenting plan in place and they need to implement those particular aspects of the orders, because the orders aren't going to be prescriptive for every single situation or circumstance, and they're fighting over that rather than going back to lawyers and throwing letters left, right and centre and maybe making a contravention application in the court or some other kind of application. It's like, okay, well, let's sit and let's work out how to resolve this. That's what the parenting coordination does. So it's sort of, so you can put in, and that's where you can put in your practical sense, the wisdom of experience. You just need to have that sort of real sort of grounded volume of expertise, I think, to be able to do that kind of work.
And so your mum had said to you, it's important to have something for yourself. You've learned that as your kids leave home.
And my family lawyer actually said it to me.
Yeah, right.
And that's why I like family law too. There's just, I still go back to things that she said to me. And she just said, always keep your hand in it. when I told her I was moving to Singapore. And she said, you just need to keep your hand in it, in some kind of work, I mean. And so and that just rang with me. And Mum, when Dad died, I was like, why am I doing this stupid law degree? I find it so hard at times. And she was like, because you're doing it, because you need to have something for afterwards, because I don't, and I wish I did.
So she regretted that, did she?
Terribly.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Law has been a real passion discovery for you, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has. It has, because I like I like the intellectual side of it. I like there's performance to it. There's engagement with people. I love interacting with people. I like the journalism part because I like knowing people's stories and helping them. I find it, I thrive on it. So, but I also like the writing side too. I like sort of telling people's stories, which is what you're doing a lot in drafting of documents and so on. The one thing I probably don't love that sort of the adversarial nature of it. So, but in family law, it's designed not to be adversarial or to limit that adversarial aspect, in that, there's a lot of pre-action procedures that funnel people into mediations and really focusing on resolving their disputes without getting to court. So there's a strong sort of area of it that doesn't have to be adversarial. So yeah, I just don't like that. Yeah, that sort of I wouldn't be very good at the bar.
So no plans to go to the bar.
God, no.
You're studying for the rest of your life about that exam. And let's come to finally the Kidman Foundation.
Yeah.
So your dad founded the Kidman Centre 40 years ago. It wasn't called the Kidman Centre then. It only got that name after he died.
It was called the Foundation for Life Sciences. Yeah.
But he sort of pioneered this idea of academics actually also then raising money for their research, which is a thing he got in the US. And Dick Smith, who I also spoke to for the was the first donor, I think, to the Kidman Centre. Yes, back when the muscular dystrophy study was happening.
Yeah.
Now, so the Kidman Centre has the Kidman Foundation as the fundraising arm, and you and your husband Craig are now on the board of that. So tell me a little bit about the work that the Kidman Centre does, because it's very adolescent, sort of youth focused. A lot of bullying work. Rachel Murray, who's the centre director, was telling me.
So they have lots of different programs, and there's one that's about to be launched in mid-November at Parliament House, which is the Super Parent Powers that Peter is fronting. Peter Overton and Jessica are fronting. But I guess it's there's many levels to it. So there's one-on-one programs and obviously psychological therapies and supports. And then there's sort of that regional Thrive aspect to it, where they go out, they send psychologists out into the regional areas to educate teachers on how to, respond and identify at-risk children, with the sort of the idea that if you can intervene early enough, there's a lot more chance of, putting in some therapeutic measures and forms of supports to allow children then to respond and have a better outcome. And also because there's not that many psychologists in regional areas. So it's sort of like educating teachers, and I know teachers have a huge amount on them anyway, but it's just to be able to manage and identify these sorts of at-risk kids that we have, that teachers do here in the city regions, but not necessarily in those country and remote areas. So there's that aspect, and then there's all that whole swathe of programs, and so it's a very and Super Parent Powers will be a digital platform that's available to anyone, that's free, and it allows you so you're not sort of in crisis. The person's not in crisis, but it's the struggling parent who's sort of got a child, they don't quite know what to do. You can go online and get some information. They're little sort of snapshot pieces of digital material, and it's useful that way. So yeah, it's designed. I mean, the whole sort of ethos of the place, I guess, is to deliver services to people to assist them who are struggling with managing their kids.
I had a look at the Super Parenting Powers thing. I've done one module already, but it's really good. It's very modern, and it's all about helping you connect with your children. Yes. So when there is a problem that comes up with them, they're much more comfortable with talking to you about it. You kind of have a better sense of how to respond rather than just freaking out and hitting the roof. And
giving you that idea of what's okay, what you do, because we get so scared. Like you go, oh my God, I've heard this is happening to my kid, and you don't know the context to put it in. It's like, well, then do I just ban everything? And you need that sort of reassurance, or the reassurance to go, yeah, actually behave, taking that approach is okay. You do need to put up some strong boundaries, and you should be now, because it's enough. So that's very, that sort of, I got that from I just had that fortunately from my parents, not saying that, but it's, a lot of, in this day and age, it's very hard to know what to do. We get so much, we get bombarded with information, and we also live in this sort of, fear of your kid's going to end up like that kid on the show in Adolescence. So, because we all watch that in horror.
I know. I haven't been able to watch it, to be honest. I'm still gearing up for that one. But it must be nice to be able to steward your father's work.
Yes,
that must be very rewarding.
It's really nice, actually. And because he died when in Singapore, so I remember looking at him and just going, oh man, I was still obviously in shock, but just going, and it's, I'm going to just honor you in some shape or form, moving forward. And I think this is my way of doing it. Yeah. I mean, we haven't, we still have his ashes. We'll scatter them. Nicole and I we will scatter them in my mother's, soon, and we know where we will, but it's just that in itself, it keeps him alive, because, one thing we all know about death is if you're dead unless people remember you and talk about you. Otherwise, it's just vapor. So, yeah.
Well, Antonia, it has been delightful talking to you. I really, really appreciate your time. I hope everybody reads the magazine and has a look at Super Parent Powers and the work of the Kidman Centre.
Thank you so much, Jordan.
That was Antonia Marran, the journalist, author, lawyer, and now mental health advocate, about the lasting legacy of her father, Antony, on the latest Good Weekend Talks. If you enjoyed this episode, please remember to subscribe, rate and comment wherever you get your podcasts, and keep tuning in for more compelling conversations. Coming soon, we chat with the legendary Ita Buttrose, the trailblazing media icon who, at 83, remains as sharp and opinionated as ever. Good Weekend Talks is brought to you by the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age, proud newsrooms powered by subscriptions. To support independent journalism, search Subscribe Sydney Morning Herald or The Age. This episode of Good Weekend Talks is produced by Conrad Marshall, with technical assistance from Chi Wong and editing from Tim Mummery. Our executive producer is Tammy Mills, Tom McKendrick is head of audio, and Melissa Stevens is the editor of Good Weekend.